Hi guys, welcome once again to Otto's Garage. Looking at some switchgear on the steering column there, and I'm trying to determine which wires do what so that we can send those signals back to the Moto Gadget. Anyway, this has occurred. I basically labelled up all of the relevant wires. We found out what they're doing, but I was struggling with the wiper control. I thought this one was an earth, and then these are the speeds basically, and this one's for the washer, the red one. However, I've then realised in my stupidity that basically we needed these yellow puppies over here, which is this one, which goes into the back of the switchgear there. The yellow one is the earth, and you need basically that connected to these to complete the circuit. But while I was doing all of that, I couldn't figure out why it wasn't working, so I took the opportunity to strip the stalk, this little puppy here, off, which has got these terminals here on it. So I took that off, and then these are all the different terminals for the speeds of the wiper. Cleaned all those up. However, what I did was when I pulled it to bits, the little, see that little contact in there at the back? Let me get a bit of light on that. There's a little contact there, and that pushes down when you pull the stalk towards you and makes the contact on the back. You can just see those there. There's a spring-loaded contact there, which basically is the washer feed. Of course, what's happened is I've taken it to bits. I've lost that little bloody plunger in there. Tipped it on the bastard floor. This little ball bearing here goes on the end of the spring, and that locates into these steps on here. So that gives you the dunk, dunk, dunk location as you flick it from 0 to 3 on the 3 speeds. So we've got that one. So in any event, what I did was I thought, what can I get into that hole? And I've come up with this solution. So that is a riv nut, and it's exactly the right diameter to drop down onto that spring-loaded contact, and then I've just ground it off to get it to the right length. So I'm going to drop that down in the hole, put the stalk back on top of it with the ball bearing, blah blah blah, and then that should work for our wash wipe. So it's just a bit of a case of looking at things, seeing what you can come up with a solution, and sticking it all back together again. I've got that back together now, and the little modification I've done on that dip switch works fine. And I've also been through and marked up all of these different terminals on the feeds from the switchgear. It's a little bit hard to get your head around because with the Moto Gadget, it's obviously triggered by earth, so a lot of the previous power that was going through the switchgear isn't going on. So for example, there was a big, quite a chunky live feed going for the headlights, which now we're just using as an earth. So basically it doesn't need to be such a big wire, but in any event, we're still keeping the main switchgear, with the exception of the wipers, because the Moto Gadget, obviously being a bike sourced distribution power source, doesn't have wipers on a bike obviously. So what I am going to have to do is run that through the fuse box on the auxiliary 2 terminal, and then basically that will feed power up to the switchgear. So that's going to basically come up, this one here feeds power up to the switchgear for the wiper selector, and then this will all be live wires coming back down, disappearing off. That's the different speeds. You've got the live feed, the 1, 2 and the 3, and the washer feed on there as well. And then this is the corresponding plug which will go into the actual wiper motor, and that's got the same colour wires on there. So I've recovered that from the loom as well. So that should be straightforward enough to do. But you just got to try and get your head around the fact that not all of the wires, like for example the dip beam one here, which is quite thick, will be taking any load. There'll be no load going through that. It's just literally an earth source on those switches. The load will go directly from the Moto Gadget Blue into the headlight. So that's basically what we're working on there. So it's just having two kind of systems, a live system and an earth system on that switchgear working together. A little bit tricky, and that's why you need to label everything up with a bit of masking tape and the pen. Well, I bit the bullet and did a little bit of sorting out because we needed a decent work area for doing all those electrics. And anyway, this is what I've done. So basically, just made ourselves a little decent space desk area. So we've got the little heat gun on that end of it, variety of wires, cutters, snippers, cup of tea, gotta have a cup of tea, and basically there's loads of shrink wrap and all sorts of connectors and the m.unit, blah blah blah. But it does mean that it's all just a little bit easier to do those connections. Anyway, what I've now done is mounted up the m.unit on the left and the distribution board on the right, and then we've got a the distribution board is running the auxiliary 2 circuit, so those two red wires come out of the m.unit and they feed power into there, so then we can run our pumps, etc., as we said before, off that lot. Inside, I've done a whole load of work on the steering wiring and connected that through, and we've got a little earth terminal at the back down there which goes straight onto the back of the m.unit, so we know we're getting good earth right the way through, as well as it earthing onto the main body. And what I'm going to do now is feed some of these wires which we put in before, which came from the back of the car. Obviously they're all temporary at the moment, just lying there. Get those through to the m.unit, and then I'm hoping that we can get a bit of power into it, and all being well, test some circuits before we finally cover up those wires in their final resting place. Just to give us the chance to change any of the wires or find any little faults and things like that before it becomes too tricky. So there we go, we'll crack on with that. As you know, we do like shiny, and here's a shiny one for you. So we've just had this back, and this is the fuel rail for the injectors, and it is exceptionally shiny. In fact, it looks brand new, but it isn't. Basically, it's been away and it's been replated, cleaned, ultrasounded, blah blah blah, but it is basically in as new condition. So that's nice. That'll look good on the engine, although you probably won't see much of it anyway. But it does mean that we can put our injectors in, which is good. Right, so these are our injectors, and basically we've got some brown injectors. These are 550s, and they're going to go in that fuel rail, and then I'm going to get the fuel rail popped on the engine. I'm hoping I can get that on without taking the manifold off, but we will see. So let's go. Right, there we go. So with the Welsh playing the World Cup in the background, that's our new injectors on our refurbished rail. So I'm going to try and get those in under there, but I'm mindful that I might have to take that manifold off to get at it. We'll just have to see. Well, I've got that in there, and you can see that rail sitting nicely with those new injectors down there. That was quite tricky. What I found was I was having to put a bit of grease on the washers to make them stick to the bolt of the head of the bolt, so that basically it didn't just drop off and then disappear. But in any event, the rail's in, which is cool, and we're going to need to sort out the pressure regulator, which obviously comes down on this end of it. Where is it? You can't even see it. But in any event, it's in. So next thing really is the electrics for the injectors, and getting the pressure regulator goes in here, but I don't know whether I'm going to use that or whether put a different one on. I don't know, I'll see. It's fucking Friday anyway, I've had enough. So I've just been having a quick look at the power steering pump, and this is what we've got. So basically that's our Astra pump that we've got there in its carrier. We've got a number of leads coming off. These are the factory leads. The thick brown one is the permanent negative. The thick red one will be the fuse supply ultimately, but I'm just going to bypass that at the moment. And then you've got these little ones coming out, and you've basically got like a blue one and a black one. They get wired up together, and that is the trigger. So basically when that has a 12-volt supply trigger down it, that will then fire up the internal gubbins in there. I'm guessing there's some kind of relay in there which then will fire up the pump, and we've got to put that permanent live on there. So what I'm going to do now is just clamp the permanent feed on to the positive there, and then we can just touch that in for the moment, and that will hopefully fire up our pump. So we'll have a quick look at that. Okay, so we'll get those on there. That's got some power going into it, and we touch that onto there. Oh, okay, that's cool. Right, so let me just get that around this side so you can just hear this. So when the permanent is on, permanent feed is on, and then the trigger comes on as well, it can start up. That's getting up to speed. And there she goes. Now she's run back down to an idle. And I believe that as you're using it, it will self-regulate the pressure that's coming out of it. But in any event, that's cool. And then when we disconnect the trigger feed, she shuts back down. So that is working absolutely perfectly, which is good news. Well, it's not warm in here. I've got the heater on, but I am struggling against some seriously low temperatures. I think we're going to -5 tonight. But anyway, we have been having a look at some of the electrics, and with that in mind, I've made an acquisition of one of these little fans. Now this is only, I think it's 9 inches long, something like that. But sorry, 9 inches across. And I needed that because the space that I've got under the turbo pipe, I'm not going to get the full-size fan in there. So we're going to try that, and I might be able to get one on the front of the radiator as well as the back, but we'll see. And the other thing that we've got is this switch panel here, and it's for racing use only. Good lord. Anyway, it's got a kind of like a isolator, mini isolator switch. Let's have a look at it. So you've got a what do they call it? Is it like a dead man switch? Suicide switch? I don't know. Anyway, that flicks up there, and it's even got a little red light on the end, which might be seriously annoying, so we might have to change that. But anyway, you close it, press it down, it flicks it off. Got the start button obviously next to it. And then for the two circuits, which I'm going to use for my auxiliary 1 and auxiliary 2. So auxiliary 1 is lights, I think it is, and auxiliary 2 is going to be all the pumps. But yeah, we'll see what that's like. Obviously the start and stop, everything's going to be negative earth. There's no power going through that anyway, so we shall see. But in any event, I needed something so that I at least can get the electric controller up and running on that and do some testing on it. Okay, so I've got the fan in place, but what I've had to do is basically, I don't know if you can see in there, I've had to tilt the radiator forward, so I've taken it off the brackets at the moment, and I've just refitted the grill to make sure we've got enough room. But I've tilted the radiator forwards, and that's meant that that fan then does fit in there quite nicely. So what we will do is we'll take the intercooler off and take the radiator out, and then basically I can fix the fan on it and drop it back down again. But it does, again, you can just kind of see it there. I've got to keep it this way because obviously the turbo is pushing forward as well. But in any event, she is in place. You can kind of see it, there you go, underneath. So we have at least got ourselves a fan. It's not the biggest in the world, but it's better than nothing. Yeah. So what I wanted to do was get the fan so that basically I can test the output off the water pump controller, because that is going to control the fan as opposed to the ECU. So we'll just jag off the ECU outlet and we'll just or the output I should say, and then we'll just have the fan controlled by the water pump. But of course I do need a fan in there just to see if it'll work, and it will more importantly fit, which it does, which is good. So we've got a number of wires and everything in place. There are just a couple more that I do have to connect up, but fundamentally we are getting there with it. There's a few more inputs down on this side. On this side, some earth inputs which we've got to connect through to. Most of the outputs are in the right place, and obviously we've got our board here which is outputting to things like the reverse switch and a couple of other bits and bobs in there, wipers, stuff like that are fed off there. So the next stage is going to be to get some power to that, even if it's temporary at the moment, and then I can test the light circuits, make sure the indicators are outputting, things like that, and fire up the Moto Gadget Blue as well, and then we can at least see what's going on. And I'll have to get that little switchboard, the starter board, connected in as well, so we can see if all of that is going to be able to control the Moto Gadget Blue. Frosty morning today, and we're back in the workshop, and we're just trying to see whether we can power up the chassis side of things on the electrics. So let's just have a look and see what we've done. So it's kind of spaghetti junction at the moment, but basically what we've got is a control board here. So this is our main power into the Moto Gadget Blue, obviously start stop button, and then there's two circuits there for the accessory circuits. One of those controls the dip beam lights, and the other one controls all of the pumps. So this is the main one for all the pumps, etc., going to the rear of the car, and things like wipers and fog lights, stuff like that. Anyway, one thing's led to another. We've got all of the essential wires connected up down there. Just get a bit of light on that so you can see that. And basically you've got the feed coming out to our fuse terminal board, which again has got the pumps on it. So the main ones up here, I think these top two here are the pumps on this side. And then you've got lesser things like the reverse light and the fog light down on that side, and the power out to the wipers. So, but fundamentally that is all controlled by the Moto Gadget Blue. So if there's any issues with any of that, it'll shut down the top two red circuits which feed onto that board. So that's the one that's controlling it. So we don't need any relays on anything anyway. So what I've done now is I've just connected up some the old horns temporarily connected up. They're controlled by the horn switch here, which also is the input for all the Moto Gadget Blue. That's the fog light switch. And then we've very temporarily wired up the FIA master switch on there. So what I'm going to do now is pop the old key in, and we'll see what occurs. There's going to be a bit of turning on of the main system for the first time. So I'll just have a quick look at that. I've got the Moto Gadget all wired up, only temporarily, but it is actually working correctly. So I'm just going to, and it, Bluetooth to the phone, so I can control all of the features for the different settings from the phone, which is great. I'm just going to take you through a few of those and we can see what we've done on it. Right, we're in the m.unit control system here. So basically what you do is, obviously it's set up for a bike. You've got things like handlebar controls, and this is for different configurations. Now in my instance, on the integrale, it's obviously got normal switches on the on the column stalks, rather than having push buttons, which you might find on a bike. So configuration C, that's with toggle switches, so that's all cool on there. Tail light, you can set up all different things on there for, whether it's got one wire, and then it will basically just put a 21 watt signal or a 5-watt signal out to the same bulb. We've just gone with standard because we've just got standard independent tail lights and brake lights on there. That one's all cool. And then you can go to things like the blinkers, which are pretty good. So here you can have them to turn on or off. It's like self-cancelling, or you can have no switch off. The distance dependent switch off, that will be, so for example, you have them turned on, you pull away from a junction, and after, I don't know, a couple hundred meters, they turn themselves off, so you can do the settings on that. I've just gone for 20 seconds at the moment. I may find in reality that I have a no switch off, in which case it's fully configured by the stalk on the steering wheel. Anyway, that's that. Brake light, permanently active, so that's basically, it's just going on, but you can set different, it'll flash different times, 8 times, and then it stays on, blinks twice. Emergency brake light comes on, so that's pretty good. So you're not going to need any of these on the track, but I might change something on there. That's just basically on off, permanently active, on off with a switch. I've got to wire something in there just to get around that at the moment so I can test it, so I'll have a bit of a look at that later on. And then you get back down to things like, it's got an alarm built into it, so basically if it starts moving around, you can set it to go off. It will send a signal through to my phone as a silent alarm. So basically if I'm in the not the pub, that wouldn't be good, would it? But if I'm having a burger or something like that maybe, and then somebody's buggering about with the car, it'll send me a message and it'll say somebody's buggering around. All sorts of distance sensitivities on there. Obviously some of those are for bikes, and we haven't got a bike, so it might be like it'll test or sense whether it's tilting left or right, things like that. But in any event, that's quite good. So we just leave that at the moment as a medium sensitivity or something like that. I think for the moment there's no big deal on that. Position light, that's so you can use your indicators as position lights on your bike, but we don't need those. And then MoWave, that basically will set the indicators to come on in a kind of like a flashing sequence like that. I'll just show you that because it looks pretty cool anyway. So basically that's activated, and then when we come around to the front of the vehicle, I will just show you what's occurring with those. I've just turned off the workshop lights so you can see this wave feature with a bit better detail, and it gives this kind of glowing action on the indicator, which I'm pretty sure is not entirely legal, maybe, I don't know, but in any event it looks bloody cool, doesn't it? So yeah, that's what that MoWave looks like. Low beam on there, basically you can just set, it's got the when the low beam comes on, basically start, kill, engine start, ignition lock, whichever one you want to go with. I've got it so that the engine will start and then the light will come on. So that's basically for the daytime running light, which I've got on there. But again, I can either, like say I'm going hill climbing, I don't want them on at all, go to manually and they just won't come on at all, so that's fine. But start and on the start of the engine, that's when we're going on that one. What else have we got on here? We have got the output auxiliary 1. So that basically is for turning on or off the headlights. I've set that for that basically, so that's easy enough to do. That's straightforward. And AUX 2, that is the output to that fused supply. So basically the little fuse outlet which has got all the pump controls on it. So that's going to be running the power steering pump, the water pump, both the fuel pumps on there, and then there's also, I think, a fog light configuration feed that's going out to it, and also all the wipers and stuff like that. So in effect, all the little circuits that you wouldn't normally find on a motorbike, I've just run through that block there. And then you could have that set so that it basically comes on as soon as you flick the ignition on, but I kind of wanted it so that it would be a pump, you know, I can basically isolate all of those pumps off and still have all the ignition on at the same time, just in case you want to run exactly as we're doing now, light checks and things like that. So that's what that is. And then where else have we got down here? We've got our side stand and kill switch. Well, obviously we haven't got one of those. Parking light, that's inactive, but you could basically run that like the dimmed, you know, main beams, things like that. So that's really, you're looking for more like motorcycle stuff really. So I haven't bothered with any of that lot at the moment. The keyless go, that's quite nice. The keyless go, basically, that will basically, as I said before, it's for activating the ignition system. So when you approach it, the car will kind of wake up. Speedo input, not really relevant in this instance, but you could put that in there. It's just for recording data basically as you're driving around. And then you've got the calibration, that's really for setting up the system initially. Okay, so it's temporarily wired up, as we said. The little blinking light down there is telling me that the alarm is active basically. And I can control all the settings for that from the Bluetooth app. But in any event, when we turn it on, it is now just reset, and you can see now we've got a steady light. So basically that is active, and it has got power to the unit. Little things like the horn, beep beep, hoo-hoo. The fog light switch, turn that one on, and that won't work. And I'll tell you why that won't work, because I've got two circuits here for the lights, dip beam lights, and the pump. So when I put the pump on, that's now sending power down to the output circuit. The two red lights on there mean that I've basically pulled the fuses out, so the pumps aren't running dry, which is great, because when the fuse does go, that'll tell me which fuse has gone, so that's good. In any event, we can now come to our internal controls, and basically, so the indicator, when you put the indicator on, we'll go left. It's showing some kind of disco at the moment. That's because of the setting I've got. Right one, that one's working over there as well. And then when we come around the back, we've got a pulsing light on there as well. It looks like it's got a bad connection, but it is just a setting in the Moto Gadget. When I hit the start button here, or start it, you'll notice after start, I've got the daytime running lights set so that after start, it will turn those on. Bingo, and they come on as well. So again, there is a setting, I can turn those off from the phone, but the daytime running lights are on there at the moment. And then basically, let's just try some of these other ones here. We've got the circuit 1, that'll turn on the dip beam. And basically that dip beam will run all the time that's on. So basically I wouldn't run that in the day, I'd just have the other lights on. And then if we go inside, we can put the main beam on. So when the main beam's on, there you can see that, that's bringing that on. You can put it on permanent, and you can just flash with it as well. So just pulling it towards me will make it flash. If you can see that. Anyway, that's all pretty cool. Wiper switch on the other side there. Well, I haven't actually got that wired up at the moment, or rather I've got it wired up, but it's not plugged into the wiper motor. That lead's still lying down there. Let's just go back a stage. So I'm just going to knock off the lights, and I like this feature on it. So hazard light switch, all you need to do is flick 1 2 3 1 2 3. And it doesn't fucking work. There we go. So now the hazard lights are on. Which is cool. So you don't actually need a hazard light switch as such, you can just use the normal switch on it. And we can see those there. Now I might find that those daytime running lights with the indicators, they might not like them on the MOT. But in any event, I can disable or enable them as much as I want. That's not a major issue on that. So I'm going to turn those, you flick the stalk off and it kills them. Kaboosh. That really is a big step forward, having all of the chassis information going through that Moto Gadget unit, and it's working as it should do, which is good. The only other one that I didn't show you was the brake light. I did wire up a temporary switch on that. Brake lights work absolutely fine as well. So that's all good. That means that I can now get the loom, which is just lying loose in the interior of the car. I can get all that kind of wrapped up and fixed in its final position. And then the only other thing that I'm going to have to do in there is get a proper battery system in place and get the kill switch mounted up properly as well. But yeah, happy days with all that. That's really good, having all of those systems working nicely, and I really am impressed with that Moto Gadget Blue. The only other thing that I didn't show you on it was that it has got a proximity sensor. So basically the car won't start with certain settings if my phone isn't near to the unit, and I can set the distance on that. So if I wander off up the hill for a bacon butty, the car won't start basically, which is a nice security feature on it as well. And then when you do approach the car, it flashes its lights at you and says, hello, welcome back. But in any event, yeah, nice little features there. Moto Gadget Blue, and it works really well. Yeah, so with that Moto Gadget Blue, I think it's not complicated to incorporate into a car system. And even if you did have like central lock-in and window controls, you could just run them off that fused outlet. That wouldn't be a major problem at all. And the great thing with it is it's doing all of the relaying in there, so you don't end up with a whole horrendous amount of extra wires and relays and everything on that. So the whole electrics is controlled safely by the Moto Gadget. The thing that I found hardest work was probably the lack of information. You know, there's plenty of people that put them on bikes, not many people put them on cars. So I hope this might help somebody in the future in any event to try and incorporate one of those solid state systems into a kit car or something. That's the main thing, or racing car. But it certainly has been fun working out. Now I've just got to tidy it all up, and then we can move on to trying to get the motor incorporated and get that engine running. Well, that's me done in Otto's garage for the day. I'm going down to see a rock concert down at the NEC, Wolfie Van Halen, so I'm hoping that'll be a good evening out. In the meantime, stay safe. Thanks for watching Otto's garage. Bye-bye now.